Welcome to the game. I'm Mark Simon. My partner, Bob Marks, is on assignment, as we like to say here. But my ex-partner, Kevin Mullin, Congressman Kevin Mullin, is here. So Kevin, welcome. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us today. Not that there's anything going on, but let's plunge right in first and foremost with this whole redistricting, gerrymandering. It looks pretty clear that there's going to be a measure on the ballot. You're a good government guy. I haven't checked, but I'd be astounded if you're not on record in support of the independent commission the voters approved some years ago. How does this sit with you? Doing this overtly doing a gerrymander, largely because it's the way the Trump people are behaving.
Yeah, I think nobody wants to be here having this conversation. In reality, I think the governor was forced to look at this option, and Democratic leaders were forced to look at this option because of the edict, the directive from Donald Trump to Texas Republicans to find 5 congressional seats with a mid-decade gerrymander. I most certainly support the work of the Independent Citizens Commission. I think California, frankly, has become something of a model. Even if when this was first instituted, I think some political folks were kicking and screaming, not wanting to give that power away. But the reality is it's worked very well. And the key point here is this commission will survive for the next census and for the redrawing of the districts for the 2032 cycle. This is a temporary measure. But yes, there's some heartburn with good government groups who really do believe in the value of the commission. But the reality is we have the proverbial 5-alarm fire when it comes to our democracy. I'm already getting tired of saying that phrase, frankly. But the reality is almost on a daily basis, Mark, we are fighting to protect our democracy. Just this week, out of nowhere, seemingly nowhere, based on a conversation with Vladimir Putin, of all people, not exactly Mr. Democracy, Donald Trump issues an executive order essentially calling for the abolition of voting by mail, which we in San Mateo County have been leaders on. And we can broach that topic as we go along here. But the reality is we have to respond. We are against an opponent that is a win at all costs guy. Donald Trump will do whatever it takes to maintain his majority in our House of Representatives. He wants to keep Speaker Mike Johnson in place, I think largely because the Speaker does whatever the president wants. And I don't mean to sound flippant in that regard, but the reality is our Article 1 powers that the Constitution gives the House of Representatives have largely been ignored by our own Speaker, the top officer in our House, who has essentially let Donald Trump do what he wants with very little, almost no pushback from the Republican House majority. So we are looking at redrawing the districts here in California. It will certainly benefit Democrats, and the governor is going to be, in all likelihood, the chief spokesman here. He's putting a lot of political capital into this, but you do have to educate the voters about what's happening here. In our world, Mark, you and I, we follow this stuff on a daily basis and have been following redistricting and the gerrymandering conversation. We still have to educate a populace in a special election, which is sort of notoriously unpredictable when you put a special on the ballot. And just as a matter of fact, just today, I'm coming to you from my home here in South San Francisco, but in my mailbox, there was a weakening our democratic process. There's already mail pieces flying around. This one is funded by, thanks to the Disclosure Act, I can see that it's Charles Munger funding this. So the money is going to pour into this battle in California, but we must do this. We have to take back the House in November of 2026 to act as a check on Donald Trump's abuse of power and his authoritarian presidency. We have to make this a reality, and it's not going to be pretty, but it's a necessity given where we are right now in our democracy.
Is this an example of fighting fire with fire, or is it an example of sinking to their level? I mean, we're seeing more Democrats drop profanities when they're talking. Clearly, there's a mindset that somehow Trump has connected with people on a fundamental level that Democrats don't. And we'll get into that topic in a minute. But isn't this really just sinking to their level? In California, I mean,
Mark, let's be clear. Let's take a step back just on the overall kind of redistricting conversation. So I'm the co-chair of something called the Task Force on Strengthening Democracy,
bodies
House Democratic Caucus. And actually, Mark, you froze up a little bit on me there. I want to make sure we've got you. Okay, a little bit of a hiccup there with the Wi-Fi. But in terms of are we sinking to their level, Mark? I would argue absolutely not. And the reason I know that is the Democrats have put forward on the national level a measure that would essentially prevent gerrymandering, that would call for independent redistricting commissions across the country. It was embedded in democracy reforms put forward by the last Congress. Democrats voted for that measure. Republicans en masse voted against it. In an ideal world, independent commissions draw the districts, not politicians. But this is, as the governor will tell you, a temporary measure in order to address what is coming at us from the president.
I've only glanced at the plans. I am assuming this has no impact to speak of on your district, on the 15th Congressional District, in terms of where it is and how the voting lines up.
Hey guys, I'm sorry about this. So Mark's audio is really choppy.
Yeah. So Mark, can you ask that again?
Just real quick, where does this line up in terms of the impact on your district? The 15th, is it pretty much unchanged, or are there significant changes to it?
So my district is unchanged. Nancy Pelosi's to the north and Sam Liccardo's to the west and south are unchanged. There are some changes to Zoe Lofgren's district in the South Bay, some changes to Jared Huffman's district in the North Bay. There's essentially a creation of a plus D Democratic seat in the northern part of the state. But there are major changes in the southern part of the state. And I know that a number of our members essentially are having some Democratic voters pulled out of their safe Democratic seats and put into other seats that make Republican seats more competitive, but also I think are favorable to some Democratic incumbents that are in so-called purple seats. So look, this is an overt political act in response to, and the key is in response to, what is happening in Texas and potentially other Republican states. I think it's very clear, though, over the long term, we ought to be enacting protections at the federal level that prevent gerrymandering across the 50 states. In fact, California's Citizens Commission really is a model, and it should be a model going forward across the country. But we are in a pitched political battle right now, Mark, where we, for the sake of our democracy, for the sake of our small d democratic republic, we have to be a check on Donald Trump's authoritarian power. We can't rely on the Supreme Court, frankly, to curb the excesses and abuses, although there have been a number of wins in federal courts curbing some of what Trump has pursued. But for the sake of our democracy, we've got to do this. But look, I'm under no illusions. Just this Mail piece today and the sort of what we're hearing about the amount of money that's going to be put into this campaign. There is absolutely no cakewalk here. The Democratic Party is going to have to educate the voters of California about why this is necessary for checks and balances and for the sake of our democracy going forward. And the National Republican Party, I assume, will put money into this as well. I know Arnold Schwarzenegger views that Citizens Commission as something of his baby. And, he certainly has sway with independent voters in the state. So this will be a full-fledged campaign. And I have conversations with good government folks. They are torn, but I think a number of them understand just the reality that we are dealing with, that this is not ideal, but it's necessary given where we are in this country right now.
Is that a winning message? Maybe it is for the ballot measure, assuming it's on the ballot this November, which is where it's being targeted for it. But if you go back to 2016, the message then was Trump was dangerous. Don't vote for him. In 24 rather, the message was Trump's a threat to our democracy. Don't vote for him. And he certainly won the 24 election. Who can always argue whether he did in 2016. But it seems to me that voters, when it's time to win over the House, let's assume all this plays out and we're, the Democrats are on equal footing with which is all, it sounds like all you really want is to be an equal playing field. But let's assume that's the case. And then in 26, the message is this guy's a threat to democracy. And it doesn't look like politically that's been a winning message.
Well, I think the message for the special election this November is going to be around democracy and the threats from Trump. The November 2026 election, Mark, that is a political lifetime away. I really think we'll revert back to a focus on kitchen table issues and where the economy is. The Republican Party holds all levers of power. And people will, I think, check in on their well-being, economic and otherwise, and make a choice. Now, there are some ironies here in that because of previous redistricting attempts, mostly in red states, the number of purple seats, swing seats, is ever shrinking. So you're talking about, you have this big ugly budget bill, we've termed it, that slashed Medicaid to allow for tax cuts for the wealthy to continue and be expanded. That measure passed by one vote, right? So you have such a narrow House majority that if we could flip 5 seats, we're in the majority. Now, ideally, you have a little bit of a cushion. And the thing is, even if there were a so-called wave election where, it was very clear that it's a good Democratic cycle, there's going to be pushback on Republican control. Even with that, it's going to be a hard-fought battle. And if we come away with a majority, and I obviously hope we do for the sake of the country, it could very well be a narrow majority. It's in many respects a 50-50 country. But we are going to be making the case. And I think the Democratic Party has lost some focus in recent cycles about economic well-being. I think inflation and pocketbook issues took a toll on Joe Biden's presidency at the end. Certainly, he didn't get enough credit for the good work he was doing on the economy, the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law, those kinds of things. And then ultimately, Kamala Harris inherited that campaign with a very short runway. And ultimately, I think people voted the economy. And even if some of the macro numbers were strong, it's really about how people feel about their own economic fortunes. And I think that will be the battlefield in terms of issue focus. And we will remind people about this budget vote that took away Medicaid from 17, if you include Medicaid and Medicare impacts and ACA impacts, 17 million people are going to lose their health insurance because of that bill. So we could have tax cuts for corporations and wealthy individuals in this country and add $4 trillion to a $37 trillion debt. So it was very clear, people who say there aren't differences between the parties, look at that vote and look at where the Democrats stood versus the majority Republican Party. And that's a learning moment if you look at that vote where the two parties stand. And And I think we're going to be reminding voters of that repeatedly between now and November of 2026.
Well, I get a lot of email from congressional leaders, Democratic leaders, and understandably, they're all looking for money, and I understand what that's about, but none of it seems to be conveying a broader message. It's, it's the desperate times, the desperate need to win back the House. But, I keep thinking about Newt Gingrich's contract with America, where everybody who ran for federal office, I think everybody but one person signed on to his contract with America and agree with it, disagree with it. It was a very concrete plan. Here's what we want for you, the voter. And they won 35 seats. Now, this was Clinton's first midterm, I believe. Where's the plan? What's the message? Other than he's no good, which was the message in 24's. And Hillary Clinton's message was, well, you can't possibly be voting for him.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
There's no doubt that we will be out in full force in 2026 with a proactive message around affordability issues, that the American people deserve better than what they've gotten from Donald Trump, who ran a campaign largely on kitchen table issues, on grocery prices, on gas prices, those kinds of things, pocketbook issues, utility costs, and so forth. The question is, are people better off now that they've had unified control? Remember, no balance of power, checks and balances being largely ignored. Where are people now, and who do the parties stand for? Do you stand for the wealthy and the corporations, or do you stand with working people? And to the extent that I have criticism of past Democratic campaigns, there was, I think, a loss of focus occasionally on the needs of working people. And if you look at the coalition, our coalition eroded to some degree based on a lack of focus there. I think there will be corrective action there. And there will be a focus on maybe not so many esoteric kinds of issues, and just a real focus on people's economic well-being, the availability of their health care. There will be a plan put forward, and it'll be grounded in affordability and economics. You don't want to reveal that in the summer of the year leading up to the election. There will be a concerted message going forward when voters are tuned in and will be making decisions about who they want to control the House of Representatives, and that will all be forthcoming.
I understand not wanting to deliver your strategic message too soon, but the Democratic Party brand is really foundering. I mean, there was a story in the New York Times this week about sharp declines in Democratic registration and commensurate increases in Republican registration. The question of connecting to the American people seems like it's more urgent than waiting until the next election cycle, isn't it?
Well, nobody likes a loser, and we lost the presidential election. I mean, this is pretty straightforward as far as I'm concerned. I think Democratic voters are angry at the Democratic Party that we allowed Donald Trump back in the White House. This is a guy who should not be within a football field of the Oval Office. And now he's pulling all the levers of power with no pushback from his own Republican House. So there is no question that the presidential cycle was mishandled. And there's no doubt in retrospect that if Joe Biden was not going to run for a second term, he should have exited the race much earlier, allowed for a Democratic primary. Kamala Harris very well could have prevailed as the sitting vice president. But the tone and tenor of that campaign would have been completely different. Now, even with that, it's quite possible Donald Trump would have succeeded, but it would have been a different framing going into that election. So there's no going back. There's no changing history. That happened. A loss occurred. Now, keep in mind, we're talking about a couple of percentage points, and I think 100-something thousand votes, 100,000 votes across 7 states. But Donald Trump did win all the swing states. It was a loss. We actually picked up seats in the House of Representatives, but we didn't get the majority. We came just short of the majority. So I think Democratic voters are frustrated that we didn't win the election, and they're taking it out on the party brand. They're taking it out on party leaders. So look, I'm not going to sugarcoat that. We have got to rebuild the working class coalition that the Democratic Party historically has relied on. I don't want to say it was taken for granted, but the reality is that there's been a real wake-up call that this party of ours has to be the big tent party. We have got to be a welcoming party. People have to feel at home in the Democratic Party, not feel excluded if they don't meet a series of litmus tests. We need to reestablish and find that ground again where economic issues are at the center. So look, there are efforts underway to develop a proactive economic message going into the next cycle. I do think the wind is at our back. Donald Trump's poll numbers are taking a hit. People don't like what they see. They don't like turning on the TV and seeing masked, unidentified individuals grabbing people off the street and throwing them into vans. They don't like the attacks on federal agencies. They don't like attacks on the National Institutes of Health and Science and Research when we're on the precipice of breakthroughs with scientific discovery. Donald Trump is pulling money away from the National Institutes of Health, which is damaging to our Bay Area economy and higher education. Attacks on higher education, a whole host of issues. Whereas, Donald Trump may be a unique communicator and sort of hits people in the gut, at the gut level with his messaging. But just in terms of governing, people do not like what they see. But I hear what you're saying. It's not enough to be an oppositional party. People have to know, if you're in power and we have the gavels, not only are we going to be providing real oversight and investigations of wrongdoing in the past 8 months, it feels like a year, but we're going to be actually pushing a proactive economic agenda if we have the gavels. And that's what this special election is about in November, and that's what the campaign will largely be about in 2026.
You alluded to the big tent and also litmus tests. I mean, clearly one of the things that has happened is that the Democratic Party has positioned itself in many ways at the hands of progressives who are somewhat intolerant of things that disagree with them. I mean, I always think about the ad that Trump ran. Kamala Harris believes in they, them, we believe in you. Does the party have to move a little bit more back to the middle?
I think the way you do that is focusing on issues that affect the most people. Now, that doesn't mean we turn away from the most vulnerable and people who really have a target on their back from this president, this authoritarian president. But we will be focused on issues that affect lots of people. Some of the issues that got blown up during that presidential campaign, you're talking about a minuscule number of cases. You're talking about a handful of transgender youth, for example, in sports. But these symbolic issues get grabbed and blown up. And the Republican Party, they are a divide and conquer kind of a party. But I think you're going to see a recalibration from our Democratic Party and focus on the issues that are really fundamentally quality of life issues when you're talking about how to afford your health care, building more housing so housing is more affordable in this country, dealing with utility bills. I mean, Mark, just one relatively I was going to say relatively minor, but in the grand scheme, it's actually pretty significant. The undoing of the green tax credits, the clean energy tax credits in the Inflation Reduction Act. In the big ugly budget bill, those tax credits were gutted. These are clean energy projects across the country, job creating clean energy projects in Republican districts and Democratic districts. Many of those projects are now going to go away. What is that going to do to utility prices, energy prices? Energy prices are going to go up because of what the Republicans are doing. They promised that they were going to make households more affordable. Their policies are going to result in the opposite. So we're going to be making that case. These are policies that affect broad swaths of voters. There are Republican districts where over half of the constituents are Medicaid recipients. And in California, these are Medi-Cal recipients. In the Speaker's own district, 40% of his constituents are Medicaid recipients. But he was the leader of the charge to undermine Medicaid. So look, a campaign's going to happen. We are going to make the case. Ultimately, the voters are going to make their decision on if they want to continue another 2 years or do they want to bring some balance to government. And I think we would have the ability to make Donald Trump largely a lame duck president if we are able to stop any legislative maneuver in the House and push our own agenda. It will force a conversation toward the middle. Now, I'm under no illusions as well. The president we have on our hands goes around the Congress. But it's made easier right now by a Republican speaker who allows that to happen. If we have a speaker, Hakeem Jeffries, he's going to assert our Article 1 powers as a House to hold him to account and his administration to account when they have overstepped their executive power. And there is absolutely a larger conversation we had, Mark, about gathering power in the executive versus the legislative branch and the role of the House and asserting our role. But it's going to require us to obviously to have the gavels to make that happen.
What's it like serving in the House these days? And frankly, you're a relatively junior member of a minority. It looks like it could be miserable.
Well, miserable is a strong word. Look, the reality is I'm of two minds. Every single day I go there, I have to pinch myself, honestly. I mean, that sounds sort of hokey, right? But the reality is when I walk up to that big white building, I'm frankly in awe a little bit that I have this opportunity to represent this district. I mean, it's again, it sounds a little Pollyanna, but it is an enormous responsibility that I feel that I represent 762,000 people on this peninsula. And I'm their voice at this time when democracy is under attack. And, there's a famous saying, and I wish I had the citation, but the times have found us. The times have found us, and we have to rise to this challenge. We have to step up and take on this president and protect our democracy for my kids' future, for your kids' future, and your grandkids' future. I want to leave them a republic that is functioning, that is a democracy where people still have a voice and elections still happen and people decide for themselves who they want governing them. So this is weighty stuff. Now, there's the practical reality of being in the minority party as a relatively junior member, but I can tell you it moves quickly and the turnover happens quickly. I've been able to secure a spot on the Energy and Commerce Committee, which is a very powerful committee. That has been a win just personally to be able to get on that committee to succeed the incredible Anna Eshoo as a Northern California rep on that body. So we can move a clean energy agenda when we get the gavel, so we can actually do something about climate change and make communities more resilient. And yes, work in a bipartisan way on a whole host of issues like groundwater issues, not exactly a sexy issues, but these are fundamental infrastructure issues that affect communities across this country, emergency alert systems, all sorts of things that are crying out for attention that I can work on in a constructive way. Yes, it is challenging being in the minority party, which could very well change in 18 months. But it is still an enormous opportunity, even with some of the dysfunction, to make an impact, to be a voice for my district, to bring money home to this donor area. As you know, we're donor region to the federal government. We need to make sure we get our share of tax dollars back. So I feel the weight of the responsibility I have, and I'm not going to squander it. As long as I'm there, I'm going to fight for this district, and also fight for a brighter day in this country, which I certainly hope is coming.
I want to shift gears just a little bit in the few minutes we have left. You have been struggling with some health issues. You had knee surgery. Things got complicated. I was surprised to learn as we were setting this up that more complications have ensued. How are you? How is your leg? And how are things going? This has been quite an ordeal.
Thank you. Thank you for asking, Mark. It's been a little bit of a saga. What started out as a pretty basic torn meniscus surgery turned into a blood clot and 2 different infections and multiple surgeries to deal with the infection. Involved a plane ride with my wife east, where she was giving me infusions in my midline IV, so I could vote on a budget bill. That was quite an adventure. If I ever write a book, that'll be a chapter in the book. And then things were going along pretty well, but my surgeon decided we ought to go in there and clean it up a little bit and see if we can't get a little more mobility in your leg. I mean, what this really is about, Mark, is I want to play full court basketball for my mental health and my overall physical health. I love playing every week to break a sweat. I had a recent surgery 2 weeks ago now, and I had a few complications there with some bleeding in the knee capsule, they call it, but that has stopped. We've stopped the bleeding, Mark. The ice and the heat are working, and I just had physical therapy today. So I'm actually, you're asking at a good time. I'm feeling pretty bullish that these are fun. The troubles are finally going to be behind me, but it's made the flights across the country almost every week a little challenging. I'm 6'3", so the leg room on Alaska and United isn't what it used to be, I guess. So, but we're getting by, and I think I'm playing basketball before the end of the year. So that's
you know me. I think you should take up swimming, but what do I know? Nobody ends up screwing up their knees quite the same way. Congressman Kevin Mullin, thanks for taking time for us and joining us on the game. Good to see you, and we appreciate your time.
Great to be with you, Mark. And please give my best to Bob Marks as well. And would love to come back anytime.
All right. And on behalf of Bob Marks and our producer, Frank Bravo, thank you for being with us here on the game. You can find us on thegamepeninsula.com and tons of other places on social media. We look forward to having you look in on us. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.